Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at 2 Kings chapters 3 through 5 in our continuing survey of the historical books. We've already looked at the outline of 1st and 2nd Kings, so this is a review, but I'm going to add something. We started with the United Kingdom of Solomon, then we had wars of Judah and Israel, chapters 13 through 16 in 1st Kings, the ministry of Elijah, and then last time we saw the passing of the prophetic mantle from Elijah to Elisha as Elijah was caught up to heaven in a fiery chariot, and then Elisha, who saw him, is now picking up that ministry, and he had asked for a double portion of the Spirit. Next, we're going to see now, we're not going to get all the way through it right now, but just the ministry of Elisha. We'll see wars of Judah and Israel, and finally at the end, it's going to be the kingdom of Judah by itself. Now, the new thing, I was just thinking about this. In 1 Kings chapter 1, verse 1, it's a one-verse thing where we have reference to Moab rebelling against the northern kingdom of Israel. They had been paying them a tribute, and now that Ahab dies, they say, we're not going to do that anymore. And as we pick up now in chapter 3, there's a reference again to that. Um, and so in chapter 1, and then we had the passing of the prophetic mantle, no mention there of Moab. And now we're picking that up again. So it's almost like bookends to the story of Elijah being caught up into heaven. Here we go, chapter 3, verse 4. Now Misha, king of Moab, was a sheep breeder and used to pay the king of Israel, that's the northern kingdom of Israel, 100,000 lambs and the wool of 100,000 rams. But when Ahab died, the king of Moab rebelled against the king of Israel. He said, no more, I'm not going to pay this tribute. Now you see Moab, where it's located south of the Arnon River. In fact, the Arnon is one of the borders, and you have the Zered River to the south of it. So those two rivers act as borders. And it makes it sort of hard to get to Moab. You have the Dead Sea to the west, the Arnon to the north, the Zered to the south, and the open area is to the east. There's a lot of nothing there, and plains, and then eventually desert. Back in 1868, there was a discovery in this area. It's known both as the Moabite stone. It's a big stela, as well as the Mesha stela, which is the king after whom it's named. You see on this on the stone here, there's different colored parts. What happened is the locals, after they had found the stone, they poured boiling water on it and then cold water, one right after the other, to weaken it, and they cracked it into a number of pieces, and they made off with some of the pieces. And so what you're seeing is part of it's, you can see both the original parts, I think that's the part that's in brown, and then the other has been replicated. Now they know what it was, they know what it said, because they were able to take wax paper and make a rubbing, and so they had kept that, but the original stone itself was damaged. It starts off, I am Misha, son of Chemosh, and he goes on, and Chemosh said to me, go take Nebo from Israel. Nebo is a mountain to the north of Moab. It's on the east side of the Jordan River. It's a place where Moses was buried. We don't have the exact location, but the Deuteronomy tells us he was buried somewhere there by God. And I went in the night and fought against it from the daybreak until midday, and I took it and I killed the whole population. 7,000 male subjects and aliens and female subjects, aliens and servant girls. It sounds like he's saying, I started this fight, and I'm going to try to finish it too. He goes on, for I had put it to the ban for Ashtar, Chemosh, and from there I took the vessels of Yahweh and I presented them before the face of Chemosh. So according to this inscription, yes, this was a battle over land and money and things like that, but it was also a religious war. And so that's the way the Moabite stone describes it. Now, you have their description of this battle, and then we have the biblical description of the same battle, and a lot of things match up, although admittedly they are different perspectives. So we read that King Joram, going down to verse 7 now, sent word to Jehoshaphat, king of Judah. Now, Israel and Judah were not always on the same page, but they're going to be on the same page. Saying, the king of Moab has rebelled against me. Will you go with me to fight against Moab? And he, that is Jehoshaphat, said, I will go up. I am as you are, my people as your people, my horses as your horses. This is the language of an alliance. And so they're forming a military alliance, Judah and Israel. Of course, we think of them early in their history. They'd been brothers. They'd been 12 tribes, but they had split up. And in that split up, sometimes they've been fighting each other, and they're going to again before our story is done. Well, he said, which way shall we go up? And he answered, the way of the wilderness of Edom. Now, Edom is the area south of the Dead Sea. So what they're going to do is they're going to take that route. Israel's going to come through Judah, and then they're going to go through Edom. They're not going to fight Edom. They're actually going to try to get Edom to work with them. And Edom volunteers. Let's go beat up on the people we don't like. And so but the going there in the south end of the Dead Sea, there's a lot of rocks and cliffs, and it's not an easy way. So the king of Israel went with the king of Judah and the king of Edom. So I've got three different kings, and they made a circuit of 7 days' journey. Now, I'm not sure if it would normally take, I know it wouldn't take 7 days if you were walking in a straight line, but it's not a straight line. There's cliffs and there's rocks and there's mountains. Um, and it's tough going. And notice, and there was no water for that army or for the cattle that followed them. The cattle they're taking, that's what they're going to kill and eat. Just they sort of take their supplies with them. And the cattle's okay, but there's no water, and they can't drink from the Dead Sea because it's salt water. It's a whole lot saltier than the ocean is. So if you can't drink salt water in the ocean, the Dead Sea is even worse. And so the king of Israel said, alas, for the Lord has called these three kings to give them into the hand of Moab. He's just about given up as they're trying to cross their way. Now, you have Jehoram, he's the king of Israel. You have Jehoshaphat, he's the king of Judah. They're both on this military mission. Notice Jehoram, by what he said, he assumed that God had decreed the destruction of his confederation. Like, "Oh, this is bad, this is very bad. Woe, God is out to get us." Jehoshaphat instead asked for a prophet of the Lord. Let me just say, Jehoshaphat's a good guy. He wants to know what God has to say about it. Jehoram assumes the worst of God. Jehoshaphat seeks the voice of the Lord, which is it's the right thing to do. And so Elisha, Elisha comes out now with a prophecy. They're told by Elisha to dig trenches. Okay, what are we? We're going to dig a bunch of big holes in the ground, and we're up here to where Moab is. We can see them, but we're going to dig holes, really? And he says to them, you shall not see wind, nor shall you see rain, yet that valley shall be filled with water. So they're going to dig holes, and they're going to strike water, okay, which is what they need. That's the problem, no water. And Elisha says, the Moabites are going to be given into your hand. So we read chapter 3, verse 21. Now all the Moabites heard that the kings had come up to fight against them, and all who were able to put on armor and older were summoned. So they've got to turn out of all the masses. This is going to be an epic battle. And they stood on the border. They rose early in the morning, and the sun shone on the water, and the Moabites saw the water opposite them as red as blood. Now, was it red because... Well, let me just say, the land around that area has a lot of, I'm not sure what caused it, but the rocks in a lot of the places around there are red. Maybe you've seen pictures of places like Petra. That's to the south a bit, but it gives you a picture of what the rocks look like. They've got this reddish tint to them. Now, is that what caused it, or was it something else? I don't know. But they rose up and they saw the water, but instead of looking like water, it looked like blood. And then they said, this is blood. The kings have surely fought together, and they've slain one another. So they see Israel and Judah and Edom, who didn't always get along. And they think, look at that, they killed each other. There's blood in the water. Now, therefore, Moab to the spoil. But when they came to the camp of Israel, there's been no fighting between the Israelites and Judah and Edom. They're ready for battle. When they came to the camp of Israel, the Israelites arose and struck the Moabites so that they fled before them, and they went forward into the land, slaughtering the Moabites. It turns into a great defeat for Moab. When the king of Moab saw that the battle was too fierce for him, and it was, he took with him 700 men who drew swords to break through to the king of Edom. He figures, well, I don't know if he was thinking I'll go for the smallest guy in town, which might have been Edom, probably was, but they couldn't even do that. Notice they could not. Verse 27, then he took his oldest son, who was to reign in his place, and offered him as a burnt offering on the wall. He kills his own son. And apparently they see him do it, and they get what's happening. And there came great wrath against Israel, and they departed from him and returned to their own land. Now, when it says there was great wrath, I don't know if a whole lot of Israelites died. It doesn't say that. But they said, whoa, this guy, killing your own son, that's a big deal. And it takes their heart out of the battle. Maybe what they're saying is, this guy wanted to rebel, but I think all the rebellion in him is out of him. When you turn and kill your own son, you're not doing that as an act of rebellion. You're doing that as an act of something else. I'm not even sure what to call it. And so that becomes the impetus for them to say, I think we're done here. And they pack up and they leave. Now, it's interesting because we have the story of this pagan king doing this, who offers up his son as a sacrifice upon the walls of the city. And I can't help but think that there's another king who also offered up his son as a sacrifice outside the walls of the city. And I'm speaking of the Lord who sent his son, John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son to die as a sacrifice. That's what the cross was all about. Here in Moab, notice it brought great wrath against Israel. That's the wording that we have here. And the story of Jesus is one where Christ took great wrath upon himself, dying the death that we deserved, becoming a curse for us. In the Moab story, he gained deliverance for his people. They said, well, I think we're done here, and they packed up and they left. In the Jesus story, he gained deliverance, well, for his people, but that's us, for the whole world. And so we have benefited in such a way by his sacrificial death. I think it's a picture of Jesus. Now, chapter 2, verse 4, then, notice we started off with this power over death, where Elisha was caught up to heaven. We saw that last time, chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. We saw Elisha coming back and interacting with the sons of the prophets, and they wanted to search for the body of Elisha, or they wanted to search for the body of Elijah, and Elisha said, "You don't really need to do that," but they did anyway. And then there was a story again we saw last time where water was purified at Jericho, where they put some sort of vegetables into the water, and it's like, whoa, that stuff's nasty. But now it becomes purified, no more death in it. And then we closed last time with the mocking boys that are killed by bears. Remember that story? We see again now where water is provided in the Moabite campaign, and remember how there was no death in it? Now there's the red water that's mistaken for the death of the Israelites. So again, these themes are together. We are going to see next Elisha and a widow of a prophet. So you had the sons of the prophets. Now there's a widow of a prophet, and oil is going to be multiplied to pay for creditors, and we'll see how that goes. There'll be sons there too in that story. And finally, we're going to see power over death again, not by Elijah being caught up, but this time where Elisha raises the son of a Shunammite woman. So it's interesting, the parallels. This is thanks to Dave Dorsey. Let me just say his book, The Literary Structures of the Old Testament, well worth your purchase. Probably one of the most valuable Old Testament books in my library. So Thank you, Dr. Dorsey. So, chapter 4, verse 1 now, we see the story of a widow, a certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets, but this prophet had died, and so that's why she's a widow. She cried out to Elisha, "Your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that your servant feared the Lord." This prophet that died, he didn't die because of bad things. He was fearing the Lord, but people die. And the creditor has come to take my 2 children to be his slaves. When you could not pay your debts, well, slavery was a thing, and this is what was called debt slavery, and it was real. She is faced with unpaid debts, and they're going to take her sons as and make them slaves of them. And that was just the way things happened. Wasn't the way it was supposed to happen. Wasn't actually legal under the law, but they weren't necessarily obeying the law, especially up there in the northern kingdom of Israel. And so Elisha is going to tell her, go get all the jars that you can get. And she's got a little bit of oil. And so he says, go borrow every jar you can from, pots, jars, whatever can hold it, from your neighbors, from your friends. They don't have to have anything in it. In fact, they shouldn't have anything in it. And take the oil that you have. You only have a little bit, but pour it into each jar. And she pours and she pours and she pours, and it just keeps coming. So there's a miracle here of multiplication. It reminds me of something that Jesus did. Remember the story of 7 loaves and 2 fish, and where he takes or at one point it was 7, and then another point it was 5. Actually, Jesus did it twice. But taking these loaves and fish and just passing them out and feeding 5,000, and another time it was 4,000, where he does the miracle twice. And the same thing is happening here, this miracle of multiplication. And God provided in accordance with the number of vessels that she obtained. If she hadn't gotten as many, then there wouldn't have been that much. But Elisha told her, get everything you can, and she did. And she basically filled up her house with borrowed pots from everybody she could get them. And every pot, when she was done, was full of oil. And so this was a miracle. And then she took that oil, she sold it, and she was able to pay out the debt. And it was a miracle. So she's instructed, it's interesting, to shut the door. That happens again later on, where maybe we're supposed to leave a little bit of the mystery to it. Shut the door so nobody else could see what was going. Shut the door because God's going to be at work in a very rare but very special way. Next, we have the story of a Shunammite woman. Now, Shunem is at the east end of the valley of Jezreel, the town there, and uh, the widow had 2 sons, but she was poor. This Shunammite woman initially doesn't have any children, so she's rich but has no sons, and she has a place for Elisha to stay when he's passing through. And he gives her a blessing, and he pronounces, because of your kindness, you're going to have a son. And so she gets a son. The son is born, and she's just so happy. But then the son dies. And this doesn't happen overnight. This happens over a period of years. And her son dies, and she's like, she was okay not having a son, but now that she's had one, she really loves him, and she says, why would God give it to me if the son's going to die? And sometimes bad things happen, and we can't figure out the reason why. Remember how the disciples of Jesus came and asked about a man who had been born blind, and they said, well, who sinned? And they figured out somebody must have done something wrong. And Jesus said, no, it wasn't for that reason. Sometimes there's other reasons. In that case, it was so that God might be glorified. I think the same thing happens here, because her son's not going to stay dead. And so she travels to Mount Carmel, where he happens to be, that mountain that juts out into the ocean. And he sends his servant, Gehazi. Now, we're going to see Gehazi in a number of different stories. But he is sent, and he's sent to the woman, but also to the son, to go and check it out. And he comes back and reports. And now Elisha comes. The child is dead, and he lays upon the body of the child. The child's there, and he's not breathing. and he lays on the child mouth to mouth, eye to eye. Now, this isn't CPR. When I hear mouth to mouth, I think, okay, I know about that, but he's been dead a while. It doesn't work like that. Mouth to mouth, eye to eye, hand to hand. What he's doing, he's identifying himself with the child. And that reminds me of the way somebody else identified with us, where Jesus identified himself with us. Now, he didn't lay on us mouth to mouth, eye to eye, hand to hand, but we receive a new identity when we trust in him. And we we actually begin to share the things that he is. He's the Son of God. We're called children of God. He is righteous. We're declared to be righteous. He is holy. We're called to be holy. He died and rose again, and we are said to have died and risen with him. That's part of that identity. And so her son now is raised from the dead. Like I said, we are raised as well. Now, the next, this is all within chapter 4. The next story involves the sons of the prophet, where there's a famine and there's some boiled stew, but the stew was poisonous. It's like, man, this stuff's bad. We can't eat it. Somebody had thrown some wild gourds. I think that that it gave it like a rotten, maybe poisonous smell or whatever. Uh, and Elisha comes and adds some meal, sort of like I don't want to say cream of wheat, but he adds some substance to it. And after that, it's okay. And so the stew is rendered palatable and they can eat it and it's fine. And notice the first two miracles were involving women. This is involving men, as will be the next one. And so, chapter 4, verse 42, you have a man from Baal Shalisha, and he brings some food to Elisha, and the food is multiplied. So, again, we have a multiplication. Notice the first of these and the last of these is a miracle of multiplication, just like Jesus did a miracle of multiplication with the Jews, if I understand correctly, when he fed the 5,000. And then when he fed the 4,000, it was at a slightly different location and seems to have been oriented more toward the Gentiles. Same thing here. A man from Baal Shalisha. That sounds like a not a Jewish place. That's not a Jewish name. And so we have the women, and then we have the men. But now we come to chapter 5, and we're still dealing now with folks that are not Jewish. So now Naaman, captain of the army of the king of Aram, and Aram is up there to the northeast of Israel, with its capital in Damascus. Now I put the term Aram here. It actually goes way off our map, so Aram's a big area. But he's the captain of the army of the king of Aram. He was a great man with his master. That is, his master valued him and highly respected because by him the Lord had given victory to Aram. Notice, Aram is that's not a Jewish country. That's not a pro-Yahweh place. And yet God had given them victory. The man was also a valiant warrior, but now we see the problem. He was a leper. Now the Arameans had gone out in bands and had taken captive a little girl from the land of Israel. We're not told exactly where. Very oftentimes these raids would take place on the east side of the Jordan. We're going to see that later on. And so she had been taken and made a slave. Remember how we had the story of the widow woman with two sons who were going to be made slaves for creditors. This little girl had been taken in a roving band of outsiders, and she'd been taken outside of the land, up there somewhere in Aram. We're not sure exactly where. And now she's a slave, and she waits on Naaman's wife. She becomes like a serving girl, a serving slave. And the slave girl, she notices that the husband of her master, she's given to the wife, but the husband has leprosy, and she says, "Wouldn't it be great if you could meet Elisha? There's this prophet down where I live named Elisha, and he has the power of God, and he's been doing miracles, and maybe he could heal your leprosy." So she tells the family of Elisha, And this captain of the guard goes to the king and says, "Hey, there's somebody down there that can maybe cure leprosy. Can you put in a good word for me?" And the king sends a letter to the king of Israel. You know, and so Aaron, the king of Aram, sends a letter to the king of Israel saying, "I have this captain. Can you cure him of leprosy?" And the king of Israel gets this letter and he thinks, nobody can cure leprosy. What's going on here? Is he trying to pick a fight with me? Maybe he wants to come to war with me and he's looking for an excuse. But so he thinks Aram is actually picking a fight with him. And Elisha hears about the message. So Elisha sends to the king, says, "Look, that's about me. Have him come down here." And so Elisha's response, he speaks primarily in this chapter through intermediaries where he sends others. He doesn't go himself, but he sends word to the king to send Naaman to him. And so Naaman comes with his retinue, and he sends instructions to Naaman as he gets close. You don't have to come and see me. Just go wash in the Jordan River. Now, the Jordan River, let me just say, I've been to the Jordan. I've been to both actually several different places in the Jordan, north of the Sea of Galilee, south of the Sea of Galilee, and down near Jericho. So all different places. And it's not all that big of a river. I've seen bigger rivers. Actually, I've seen bigger canals in South Florida that are bigger than the Jordan River is at least when it's dry and in the summertime. And so Naaman says, "Why should I go there to the Jordan? I mean, I could have stayed back home, and I got bigger rivers back there. I've got cleaner rivers. I'm not sure if it wasn't clean today. It's a little polluted. I don't usually, I wouldn't drink from the Jordan. I know they do baptisms and things like that, but just take care. Don't drink the water." But Washington and Jordan, and his slaves point this out. His slaves say, if he had told you to do some really big thing, like build a big tower or go walking around you would have done it. This is an easy thing. You might as well try it out. And so he goes and he washes in the Jordan, and he's cured from his leprosy. I mean, it works. And so he's initially offended, but he obeys, and he comes out clean. And when notice, Naaman was furious and went away and said, "Behold, I thought he will surely come out to me and stand and call in the name of the Lord his God." He was expecting a big show and wave his hand over the place and cure the leper. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, and there's actually two different rivers that are in that area, better than all the waters of Israel? Jordan's the biggest river that Israel has. They don't have a lot of water. Could I not wash in them and be clean? So he turned and went away in a rage. But his servants came near and spoke to him and said, "My father," that's the title of respect, "had the prophet told you to do some great thing, would you not have done it? How much more then when he says you wash and be clean?" I mean, that's an easy thing. Just do it. And so he went down and dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan. That's what he'd been told to do, according to the word of the man of God. And his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. Let me just say, uh, my flesh, I'm an old guy. My flesh is wrinkled, and it's got what my doctor has called barnacles on it. These some are not good, some are harmless, but none of it looks good. I don't have the flesh of a little child, but he did. He did. And the Septuagint, when it's describing this, now it's written in Hebrew, but it's been translated into Greek. And when we read the Greek translation, ebaptisasto is the Greek term here. It's the aorist middle of the Greek baptizo, which, I mean, that sounds like baptism because that's the word, the Greek word for baptism. He baptized himself 7 times in the Jordan. At least that's the way the Septuagint rendered it. And so I think maybe there's a little bit of a picture of baptism and what it signifies and how we are cleansed by what it signified. Now, Naaman's conversion then, now that's his healing. But when he comes out and he has the physical healing, but he also begins to be changed on the inside out. You see, this is not just a physical baptism, but something happens within him as well. And so he makes a confession. Notice when he returns to the man of God with all his company and came and stood before him, he said, "Behold, now I know that there's no God in all the earth but in Israel. So please take a present from your servant now." He wants to give a love offering, a thanks offering to Elisha. And he offers a present. He says, "Please take a present from your servant now." And Elisha refuses. He said, "No, no, no. God did this. I'm not going to take anything." And he said, "But as the Lord lives, before whom I stand, I will take nothing." That's Elisha speaking. And he urged him to take it, but he refused. And so Elisha says, "No, I will not take anything from you. I accept your thanks. That's great. But you thank the Lord." And then he wishes to take some of the land home with him. He says, "Can I take a little bit of Israel? Can I scoop up some earth because I'm leaving Israel, but I've come to believe in the God of Israel, and so I'd like to take a little bit of Israel with me." you know, and I don't think this is just superstition. I don't think. I think he is so thoroughly changed. He wants, as much as he'd like to stay in Israel, he's got a job. He's a general that has a king back home, and he's got to go back home and continue his job. But he wants to have some of Israel with him, and so, and Elisha says, "Hey, knock yourself out. You help yourself. I mean, dirt we have plenty, rocks we have plenty," and he does that. And he's thinking also about future worship, where he says, now when I get back home, part of my duty is to be sort of the bodyguard of the king. And the king is he doesn't believe in Yahweh, so he goes to the pagan temple, and he'll go in there and he'll bow down, and I have to go in there with him. Not that I believe in that pagan god anymore. I believe in your God, the Lord God, Adonai Eloheinu, the Lord our God. But when I go in there, I might have to bow down just because I'm holding his hand, and but I don't mean it. And so don't judge me on that. And Elisha says, "That's cool. That's all right. I get it." And so, but chapter 5, verse 20. Now we have a problem, and it's not the problem with Naaman. It's the problem with Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of God. And notice he thinks, "Behold, my master has spared this Naaman the Aramean by not receiving from his hand what he brought, riches and gold and all. As the Lord lives, I will run after him and take something from him. I'm going to make a profit, even though Elisha would not." And so Gehazi pursued Naaman. And when Naaman saw one running after him, he came down from his chariot and to meet him. He says, "Hey, is everything okay? Is all well?" He said, "All is well. My master has sent me, saying, Behold, just now 2 young men from the sons of the prophets have come to me from the hill country of Ephraim. Please give them a talent of silver and 2 changes of gold." Now he's lying. He just made this up. He's getting this for himself. And Naaman said, "Please, be pleased to take 2 talents. I mean, take it, take it." And he urged him and bound 2 talents of silver in 2 bags with 2 changes of clothes and gave them to 2 of his servants, and they carried them before him. When he came to the hill, because he can't walk in with these servants and all this stuff into the presence of Elisha, he'll get in trouble for that, and he knows it. So when he came to the hill, he took them from their hand and deposited them in the house, and he sent the men away, and they departed. And he thinks, "I got away with it. Everything's cool." So we have Naaman. Notice, in contrast to Gehazi, Naaman had come to Elisha as a leper to be healed. Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, is going to become a leper as a act of judgment against him. He's going to get the leprosy that Naaman had been relieved of. Naaman had undergone not only a physical healing, but I think a spiritual conversion, as evidenced by his actions, by his wanting to take some of the land of Israel, by his being conscience stricken. Look, I have to go in to do my job, but I don't want to be worshiping. Don't think I'm worshiping that pagan god. That's the words of a convert. Gehazi had spent some time as a servant of Elisha, but I don't know that he's converted. No, I don't want to judge him, because sometimes even believers sin. But he's acting like an unbeliever. I'll at least say that. And let me just say, when we sin, we act like an unbeliever. We do the same thing. In the Naaman's case, he's not interested in guarding his money, and he gives to Gehazi twice the amount that was required, that was requested. Gehazi, for his part, he's plotting to gain some money from Naaman by concocting a lie about a financial need. None of this is true. One's in it for the money, one's in it for the Lord, and not the one that you would think. And Naaman, the non-Jewish person, the non-Hebrew, the non-Israelite, is the one who has been converted here. So he goes in, Gehazi goes in and stood before his master, and Elisha said to him, "Where have you been, Gehazi?" And he said, "Oh, nowhere." He's lying, he's covering it up. Then he said to him, "Did not my heart go with you when the man turned from his chariot to meet you? Is it a time to receive money and to receive clothes and olive groves and vineyards and sheep and oxen and male and female servants? Therefore," here's the judgment, "the leprosy of Naaman shall cling to you and to your descendants forever." This is going to be a lasting judgment. Now, Gehazi's not going to die right now. We're going to see him. He's going to continue as a servant of Elisha. We're going to see him later on in the story. But he went out from his presence, a leper as white as snow. So you have Gehazi, and we've been comparing him to Naaman, but I want to compare him as we close, compare and contrast with Jesus. Gehazi sought payment for work that he didn't do. Jesus made a payment for sins that he did not commit. That was his work on the cross. Gehazi was punished with the leprosy that had belonged to Naaman. Jesus took our sins upon himself. He bore our punishment. He bore the guilt that belonged to us.